130 years ago this November, history was made in a field right behind me. Hello, I'm Robert Lowell Goller. Thank you for joining me for our weekly chats about local history. I am behind what is today the middle school, but it used to be the high school. And back in 1895, it was the high school, and a group of boys walked from the school right here across the street to a field behind the houses here to play the first ever football game in the village of East Aurora. Now, I was researching the history of football and baseball and several other sports for the book that has been recently released, Who Put the East in East Aurora. And there's a whole chapter about Hamlin Park. And I include, there's a whole section about schools as well. But this one's in the chapter about Hamlin Park because football eventually ended up being played in Hamlin Park. But inadvertently, as I was searching for the history of football and the football fields, I found the very first game that was played here in the village of East Aurora. And it was in the East Aurora Advertiser, they had mentioned that the field was going to be behind a house on Fillmore Avenue, which just happens to be right behind me here, and the houses are there. And I can't pinpoint the exact location, but I am assuming from the maps that we do have of that time period that it was the field behind these houses here. It could have been up over there, but nevertheless, it was played right across the street from the rear of what was then the Union School, the public school. And in 1895, November 2nd, a group of boys played the first ever football game on that field behind Peter Caseman's residence. And I've searched maps, I can't seem to find them, but they did say that it was in the rear of Peter Caseman's residence on the north side of Fillmore Avenue. So we know it was played over there. And what was really interesting is football was a very, very new game, and it was a foreign concept for many people in the village of East Aurora. Imagine today we know what a football game looks like because we watch it on TV, but they didn't have TV back then. They didn't have photography, universal photography, a little bit of it, but not something that you would have seen of a football game. So they had no concept of what a football game even looked like. So over 200 people, according to the news reports, gathered for that first football game on the gridiron, as they said, behind Peter Caseman's residence. And an ambulance was also there as well, one of the early ambulances, because they knew that this game was going to be a little rough. And the 200 people gathered, and East Aurora, I believe, won. And the reason I say that is because the newspaper report doesn't give a score. They just talk about the back and forth. And in fact, what I found very interesting is that the game was so new for people in East Aurora in 1895 that they had to actually explain what was happening. Today, we take for granted what a touchdown is. What a field goal is, what a punt is. Well, they were just explaining it as each team did it back and forth. They were explaining not in the words, the terms that we use today for it, but they were describing each action of the game. And actually, the East Aurora Advertiser had a very long column about that very first football game against a Buffalo team from a Buffalo public school right on the field behind me here. And one of the things I found very interesting is that the advertiser had indicated that that people were confused, not necessarily about the rules of the game, but why it was called football. And they said, I thought this was a great quote, "Thus East Aurora has witnessed the first match of what is called under the misnomer of football, as only twice or three times was the ball kicked." People could not figure out why it was called football when you rarely kicked the ball during the game. It was moved quite a bit and thrown quite a bit, but your foot touched the ball far fewer times than it did with your hands and throwing it. And so people thought that was quite interesting. They couldn't figure out why it was called football. And that was one of the mysteries that people left the game with in their heads. They couldn't figure out why we called it football. Now, even though the ambulance was there, the advertiser reported that a few injuries, actually a couple bloody noses were all that they experienced. Mind you, they didn't have the helmets that we have today and the safety equipment, but they said that the players held on pluckily until the end, and there were subsequent games. They went to Elma, they went to Orchard Park, and those teams also came here along with several Buffalo teams. Now, this is just a small part of what I talk about football here in my latest book, Who Put the East in East Aurora. East Aurora had a tough time finding a football field that would work. So only a few games, one season I believe was played on the field behind me, and then it moved to other locations, including Hamlin Park. But I talk all in here if you want to know more about it. East Aurora's quest to get a safe football field. There was actually problems with the Hamlin Park field. It was on the outfield of the baseball diamond. And then it was once played over on Whaley Avenue, and then they played a little bit on the field that used to be on Walnut Street at Prospect Avenue. So the history of the football field in East Aurora is quite fascinating. It moved around quite a bit before it went up to the high school on Center Street, when the high school on Center Street was built. But a lot of people who lived in East Aurora for a long time, or went to East Aurora High School, remember the players walking down South Grove Street in their cleats to get to Hamlin Park for those games in the 1950s and 1960s at Hamlin Park. But the first game was played beginning at 3:30 p.m. The Easter Advertiser even had that detail, on November 2nd, 1895. So we are coming up on the field right behind me. So we are coming up on the 130th anniversary of the very first football game played in the village of East Aurora, on the field north of Fillmore Avenue, behind what is now the middle school, but at the time it was the high school. So a little tidbit of history that I include in the book, and if you want to know more, pick up the book. It's available at local bookstores, or you can find out how to purchase it on my website at robertlowellgaller.com. And I do appreciate all you supporting my latest book project. Getting a lot of great feedback, and a lot of people are picking it up, so I appreciate that. So again, thank you for joining me for our weekly chats about local history. Again, I am Robert Lowell Galler. I am the Town and Village Historian, but these videos and a lot of my research, including my book projects, are not officially affiliated with my duties as Town and Village Historian. Live from behind the Main Street School, thank you for joining me, and thank you for keeping history alive. We'll see you next time. Take care.